Hi math students, this is our introduction video for our lesson on variables. In this first part, we're going to talk about when and why you would want to use a variable. There's two different stories here that we're going to talk through. The first one is Samantha has 7 students and Jeffrey has 3 students. They combine their students for an activity. This first one is review from previous lessons, so go ahead and try to write an expression to represent the total number of students doing the activity. Pause this video to do that now and then come back to see the answer. So in this first story, we're told that I have 7 students, Jeffrey has 3 students, and we want to combine their students. That word combine helps me know that we want to do addition. So in this problem, we would want to take my 7 students and add Jeffrey's 3 students, and this is the expression that represents the total number of students. We could also then solve this if we wanted to say that there's a total of 10 students doing the activity. But the main thing here is the expression 7 plus 3. Remember, expressions are like math problems. They might have numbers, operations like add, subtract, multiply, or divide, and so this is our expression for the first story. The second story is similar, but there's one key difference. In our second story, we have Becca and Hassan combine their students for an activity with the same question. Write an expression to represent the total number of students doing the activity. Here, we're also told they're combining their students, so I know it's going to be addition, but there's one big difference in this story. Do you see what it is? Well, in this story, we don't have any numbers. I don't know how many students Becca and Hassan have, so my answer is going to have to look a little different. In math, when you want to write something to represent a story, like we're doing here, but you don't know one or more than one of the numbers, we need to use something called a variable. A variable is going to look like a letter. And that letter is going to represent an unknown number. So for example, in this story here, I would need 2 letters for the 2 numbers I don't know. I don't know how many students Becca has. I'm going to choose the letter B and say that B represents the number of Becca's students. You can say the number of Becca's students, how many students Becca has, anything like that. And the other thing I don't know how many students Hassan has. So I'm going to use the letter A there, and I'll say A represents the number of Hassan's students. And again, you could describe it as how many students Hassan has, the amount of students he has. You can also choose any letter you want. So I chose B and A. You can choose any letter in the alphabet. The only thing, if you use B for Becca's students, you cannot also use B for Hassan's students. You need different letters for different numbers. But now that I have my 2 variables here, B and A, now I can write the expression. Our expression would be the number of Becca's students plus the number of Hassan's students. And so similar to up here, the 7 plus 3, our expression for this story would be B plus A. You can think of this almost like a recipe or directions for how we would find the total number of students. To find the total number here, we need to add Becca's students plus Hassan's students. This is what today's lesson is all about. It's about identifying in a story what are the numbers you don't know, describing your variables, and then using your variables to write an expression that looks something like this. So we've got one other example in this introduction video. The story is Myra works as a waitress. She makes $8 per hour and made $100 in tips last night. Write an expression to represent the total money Myra made last night. I'm going to have you go ahead and try to identify what is our variable going to be in this story. In the story, there is a number that we don't know, but we need to know in order to find how much total money she made last night. Read through the story and see, can you identify what extra information do you need to know to find her total money? Well, in the story, I know how much money she makes each hour. I know how much money she made in tips. But with that $8 per hour, I know she makes $8 every single hour, but I don't know how many hours she worked last night. And so if you can say, I don't know how many hours she works, and we need to know that for the total money, that is your variable. So this time I'm going to use the letter H as my variable, and I will say H is going to represent the number of hours she works. And after I've got that, now I am good to write my expression. When we go to write our expression, similar to above, it's also important to identify what math operation you're using. So for example, for these problems, because we were combining students, I knew it was addition. Here, there are two operations happening in this story. First, with the $8 per hour. If you make $8 per hour, you would want to multiply $8 times the number of hours you work. So we could say something like 8 times H, 8 times the number of hours, or this is the same thing as just saying 8H. When you write it like that, it means multiplication. So we've got our 8H, and then there's one other thing we know. We know she made $100 in tips. That's adding money to her total money, so we could say 8H plus 100. So our expression for this story is 8H plus 100. In today's lesson, we're going to do a lot more examples like this where we have to identify variables and write expressions representing a story. You're ready for today's lesson? Thanks so much for watching.